Hello again. I'm Cam Marston. You're listening to What's Working. Thank you so much for joining us today, this morning, this evening, whenever you're listening to the show. So grateful to have you as a part. What's Working, if you haven't heard it before, is a show that focuses on the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace trends. And as I was thinking about today's intro, I feel like this may be a good time to define the way I use that word trends, because what I think you're going to hear in this show is something that has been a trend and is moving to a principle. And I'll tell you more of what I mean about that in a moment. What's Working tries to find guests that can talk about the trends in such a way that we can learn from them, that we can take an idea given to us by that guest and apply it to our own world in some meaningful way. Most likely the workplace, the workforce, or the marketplace. Those are the trends we try to dig up. But somewhere, hopefully, in your world, these things will help. That's the goal of the show. We promise no politics. We promise no controversy, no animosity in a world that's moving into the political season even further and further. Everybody that talks on the radio or appears on the television is red in the face with outrage. You're not going to find that here. And if you're looking for that, this show will not solve that problem. Trends. What is a trend? So I go to the definition from my old workplace colleague, I used to bump into him on the road back in the day, named David Zock. And I always really, really admired the way David saw the world. It was very different. But he defines it this way. There are fads, there are trends, and there are principles. And I may have said this on a past show, but I'm going to pretend like I haven't. Fads, we all are familiar with fads. They come and go quickly. And when we think about fads, we more often than not think about kind of holiday fads, gift fads. Those are the ones that immediately come to mind. These fads, the gifts that every parent wants to get for their child, and they get into fistfights in front of Walmart at 1 a.m. in order to get the last one remaining. You think of dolls and electronic toys and things like that. They're fad gifts. One of the fad gifts that have taken our nation by storm lately is this Stanley Cup. Goodness knows we've got a bunch of these things, none of which are Stanley Cups, but it's an insulated mug. And this one particular brand seems to be the fad brand. The point, they come and go quickly. You want to be a part of the upswing in the fad. You don't want to be a part in the downswing of the fad. When the fad is over and you've got a huge inventory full of Stanley Cups, you can't get rid of them. Fads. Stay away from fads. If you can get into them, make sure you get into them on the upside. Trends. And believe me, this is going somewhere. Trends last longer. In order to play the game in business, you must acknowledge trends. Trends are the things that are truly influential in the way that you do business. A trend in my seminar world historically has been there was this trend of TED type of talks that I used to do 1-hour seminars, and then the TED Talks came in and they said, hey, we want a 20-minute TED Talk. And all of us that had been doing it had to adjust to this trend and be able to deliver a quality 20-minute TED Talk. And I very seldom get asks for those types of talks anymore. They're back to wanting the 75, 90-minute comprehensive content stuff. Thankfully, I enjoy those the most. I feel they're the best bang for my client's buck. Fads, we've talked about. Trends, we just discussed. Principles last longer. Principles are unchanging. Principles are like customer service. We always want good customer service. Principles are courtesy and kindness and fairness in business. Principles are the core. You don't break the principles. You play with the fads, as David Sock taught me years ago. You play with the fads. You work with the trends. You never disobey the principles. What was once a trend in hazardous waste disposal of doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do is becoming a principle. And this is a shift going on in our society, thankfully. And when we get back from break, I will have Ted Reese in front of me here in the studio. Ted is the president and CEO of Cadence Environmental Energy. And he's going to tell us about his business and the movement of people, companies, organizations wanting to responsibly dispose of their hazardous waste. It's a good story. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Thanks for joining us on this episode today. Sitting across from me in the studio is Ted Reese. Ted is the president and CEO of Cadence Environmental. Ted and I are great old friends, and it was just this opportunity to actually learn a little bit more about what it is that he has done in his business, Cadence Environmental, and that's what we're going to do. I can honestly say that he and I were sitting here kind of planning the show. I was aware of about 1/10 of all that it is that he does, and I think folks like me, you're going to be fascinated with everything. Ted, thank you so much for your time, and welcome to What's Working.
Wow, thank you so much, Cam. This is very exciting for me. Very exciting I've obviously been a fan of yours for a very long time, and now been a fan of the show for the last 6+ years.
6+ years, yeah. And I'm grateful that we could get you to pull your car over in Mobile to have this show about Cadence Environmental, which has an extraordinary footprint across the nation. You mentioned to me that it's 49 years old. Tell me more about Cadence Environmental, what it is that you do. Let's bring the listeners up to speed on what it is that Cadence does.
Yeah, so thanks. We are entering our 49th year of business, and I've been with the company 23 years. My father founded the company back in 1975. So we've been around for a long time in our industry, and we're definitely a niche business, but we're very well known in our part of the world as supplying alternative fuels to the cement kiln industry.
So alternative fuels to the cement kiln industry, we're going to need some definition and clarification on that, just like I did prior to us beginning the recording here. What does that mean?
So the U.S. consists of well over 200 kilns nationwide. And those kilns operate at very high temperatures, over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. They need that temperature to get the internal thermodynamics set such that they can turn basically various forms of rock into clinker to make ready-made cement. So they're very heat-intensive processes, and generally in the past they relied on fossil fuels for that energy. Fossil fuels meaning coal, natural gas, pet coke. And my father was one of the early pioneers back in the early 70s that found waste with energies could be used in lieu of the fossil fuels.
Waste with energies. Now, again, another description for me, please.
So think of a lot of your solvents, wastes, oils. If you go back to the 60s, there was a lot of misappropriation of wastes. 55-gallon barrels were popping up in rivers and streams and landfills. So thankfully, it took some bright minds in the 70s when EPA was formed, Clean Water Act was formed, and regulations came trying to protect some of our protect our natural resources. So processes and treatments were formulated to basically take these solvents and wastes and put them in a form to thermally treat them. And one of the best processes for a variety of reasons was the cement industry.
So we take and you told me before we started this, you go to the quick lube oil change place. The oil that they take out of your car could theoretically end up in one of these kilns. across the country, and it is cooked at 3,000 degrees so that any harm that it may do is completely eliminated by the extraordinary temperatures, and it becomes a part of the ready-made cement that I'm using to pack around a fence post as I'm working at the camp to set up a new fence.
Yeah, absolutely. So now oils, all of these wastes, have continually improving technologies put in place. So oils actually are very, very rarely find their way to us at the kilns these days, because basically now they're re-refined and sold. But the concept is there. So a lot of oils came to us in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Now, majority of our business is waste solvents. So if you think of your large chemical plants, refineries, and a lot of all different size chemical plants. So you have your very large companies like BASF, gigantic operations, to smaller batch processes. They all generate waste, and they have to properly dispose of that waste. And so where we have a nice partnership is they want their waste gone, disposed, not showing up in the future as part of a groundwater issue, right? So when they send that waste to us, we feed it into the kiln at over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and that literally breaks the compounds down into individual components, and those individual components become part of the final process. So the waste is truly destroyed, and with the EPA, we talk in terms of 99.49 up to 69% destruction. So we truly destroy the waste as compared to some of our competitors, thermal competitors. They do a very good job destroying different types of waste, but they often operate at 80 to 95% destruction. And so the listener may say, well, that sounds still pretty good. It is good, but when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of tons of waste a year, a 5 or 10% difference means there's a lot of waste that still ends up in the landfill. And that's ultimately what we're trying to prevent.
So is it safe to say that you used a chemical plant as an example a moment ago, and we'll just piggyback on that. Is it illegal for the chemical plant to put this waste in the ground, or are they choosing to send it to someone like you because it's the right thing to do?
So it gets complicated. Our industry, as it should be, is very highly regulated. So basically, one of the things you learn if you're working with potentially a waste is the EPA has a very detailed list that you go through to determine, first of all, I forgot what they call those, not a Venn diagram, but you think about your flow chart box.
Yeah.
And basically it starts at the top is, can the waste be reused? Yes or no? So you kind of go through this whole category that determines, is it a waste? Is it a hazardous waste? And then based on some of the chemical compositions and toxicity, that starts determining what are appropriate may not even be thermal, what are appropriate treatment sources that can manage that waste. So that's what leads you to, the waste generator doesn't just simply say, well, I can send it to landfill because that's my lowest cost. Well, landfill can only accept certain types of waste, where we battle with, and we really, our goal is trying to keep things out of the ground, because we are long-term believers in, no matter how great of a landfill you build, no matter how great of a barrier you say you have, nothing is ever 100%. And so sooner or later that material, the waste is going to end up in the groundwater. And especially when there's thermal processes out there that can keep this material out of the ground, why wouldn't we be doing it?
Yeah. So many of these chemical plants are simply, when they go through that flow chart thing, they very clearly say, well, we can't put this in the ground. We got to do something with it. They hire you guys to take it off their hands. You bring it to the plant, get it to the plant some way or another, and put it into the kiln. I know I'm oversimplifying this. There's got to be a lot of technology involved, a lot of chemical computations, et cetera. And it has something to do with the BTUs.
Right.
Describe that to me again.
So that's a measure of the energy value of the waste. So what we do is we do a full battery of tests. We're looking at what's the chemical structure, what chemical components exist in the waste. That helps us determine how or if can we manage this material. But one of the most important tests from the beginning is determining the energy value. So our goal is to replace fossil fuels for the cement plant, which, I'll kind of get into the economics of what that looks like. It's our customer comes to us and says, I've got a waste. It has energy content. I want to ship it to you. I want to pay for it to be destroyed. And basically, our partner gets the benefit of the fuel savings.
Ted Reese is with me. We'll pick it up there, Ted, after this break. Ted is the president and CEO of Cadence Environmental, headquartered in, is it Indiana?
So our corporate offices are in Indiana, and our probably busiest office is the Woodlands, Texas, just north of Dallas.
We'll be right back.
This is Bill Eastet. I perfected my baking recipe behind my live music stage at my little restaurant in Fairhope, Alabama. We have custom-made smokers and small batch bacon made just for you. So if you're looking for the best bacon in America that has been cured, smoked, and even serenaded by songwriters, you definitely need to try Billy's Small Batch Bacon. www.billysbacon.com.
I'm Cam Marston. You're listening to What's Working. We're back. I'm sitting across from Ted Reese in the studio here in Mobile, Alabama. Ted is the president and CEO of Cadence Environmental. Been in that role for 5 years. The company itself is 49 years old. Ted, prior to the break, you were telling me a little bit about BTUs. Why don't we get into, let's face it, I'm an arts and sciences major from back in the day. You're a chemical engineer, is that right?
Yes.
Chemical engineer from back in the day. Help me define energy content. What does that mean as you're taking these wastes and disposing of them? You're looking at their energy content. What does that mean?
Yeah, sure. So the whole conversation for us is around replacing fossil fuels. So when you're replacing fossil fuels, you're looking at the energy value, and the energy value is the parameter that we look at is BTUs per pound. So what we do is, like, you look at coal. Coal would be anywhere from 12 to 12,500 BTUs per pound. So when we go to the market and we're looking at a variety of wastes, we're basically mixing, matching, putting together, and we have regulations how low, or not so much how high, but how low we can go. What you can't do is take things with no value and blend them up to use as a alternative fuel. But there's plenty of waste out there in the 5,000 to 20,000 range. So for instance, you brought up oil earlier. Oil would be off the chart. If we get our hands on oil, we're happy, because that's 20,000 BTU, and that's a great material to blend with other things. Probably more common would be like a refinery cleans out a tank, and the tank has oil, which is great, but it's also got contaminated waters and lower BTU solvents. So you take that mixture, all of a sudden you might be dealing with 5, 6, 7,000 BTUs with 40% water. So you mix that with some of your other inbound streams, and that's part of what we do for our partner Ash Grove Cement and other kilns, primarily Ash Grove Cement, is go to the market, find these wastes, find the proper price points that make everybody happy, and then kind of going back to, I didn't really go into it earlier, but our company's just over 40-ish employees.
Yeah. And
a good portion of that is our sales and marketing teams and our customer service. But over about 55% of our company, I would say 25 employees, are primarily in the labs. So one of the things that kind of separates us from our competitors is we're not just a sales marketing company, but we actually run the laboratories at both Ash Grove facilities. We've done that for over 30 plus years. So we've got a very specifically trained group that is focused on looking at hazardous waste, everything from non-hazardous, but we mostly focus on hazardous waste, And those wastes come in and they run all the appropriate tests to quantify and identify these wastes.
So the hazardous wastes, I understand, things that if they get in the groundwater are going to make you and me sick, going to make the animals sick, whatever it may be. But you use the term non-hazardous waste. Give me a sample of what that is. You're not in that business, but help me understand what that means.
So because we have a certain amount of capacity at the Ash Grove kilns, we want to maximize the volume and the revenue. And the revenue is tied to the hazardous waste. So we're maximizing hazardous waste into Ash Grove. However, I said at the beginning, there's over 200 kilns in the United States. Roughly 12 to 14 of those kilns are permitted to take hazardous waste. And just by way of the regulations, it's kind of like barriers to entry, barriers to exit. We don't see anybody coming in or out of either. But the non-hazardous market is where there's a lot of growth. You've got 175, 180 plus kilns that have the ability to consume non-hazardous materials. And those are things like, they could be off-spec products, could be, pharmaceuticals could fall into that area, cosmetics.
I remember you telling me one time back in the day about getting a load of cosmetics that were off-spec and didn't want them on the marketplace.
Nope. So the manufacturer, which I can understand, whether they're off-spec, surplus inventory, they don't want those entering a secondary market, so they take them to a thermal facility like a kiln where they know that material is going to be destroyed. The other really big one that Cadence had a very large role in the 90s and the 2000s was tires. So, you think of how often you change your tires. I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. But those 4 tires, if you look on your bill, you get charged a very nominal fee. I think it's like $5 or something. But those tires end up, we call them tire jockeys. You got these independent contractors that run around collecting those tires, and they kind of feed them up to a tire company, and then that company takes them to usually some form of a cement kiln, or they could take them to a processor. So we developed technology to help the kilns feed those tires whole, like as is, because with a lot of things, the more you touch it, the more cost there is associated with it.
Right.
So if you could feed this tire to the kiln in its current condition, hands off, as automated as possible, that's a good thing. But some of those tires also end up with companies that shred them. And you've probably seen there's a lot of parks. There's a lot of, that's a very popular use, is they shred that tire down and use it as a floor mat type thing.
Is this, since I've known you, I've known a little bit about what you do, but is this a common, who else is doing this? If we go into Canada, are they doing something similar? Are we behind Europe in this technology? Where do we stand, or is this a uniquely U.S. phenomenon?
So it's interesting. A lot of technology did come out of Europe, Central and Western Europe, and I don't get into this fight, but on the cement, Portland cement side, there's a big argument between the U.S. and France over who created Portland cement.
What is Portland cement?
It's a specific type of cement product, and this is where we're around it. We're not fighting that battle. Our interest is supplying the alternative fuels to the cement manufacturer. But to go back to your question, so in Europe, it really comes down to landfill capacity. So if you think of Europe, right, whether you've been there, not been there, you can look at a map and see a lot of people, small area, they don't have excess space. Whereas look at the U.S. outside of the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia. Okay, that area is tight, probably like Europe. But as you start moving west, and the further west you go, there's a lot of unused land. Canada, I would say the same thing. I would think along the border, more populated, and then a lot of land to the north of them. So basically your non-hazardous material. So in Europe, because they don't have the landfill capacity, and I'd like to think they think they're doing the right thing, they've tried to find ways to thermally treat these wastes as opposed to putting them in the ground or shipping them elsewhere. So a lot of technologies come out of Europe because they're kind of a little ahead of us in that, space. However, in the U.S., I do think, I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but I have to believe at some point people are going to, there's a big movement now to keep things out of the ground, and they use energy as one of the primary drivers, right? If a waste has energy, there's got to be a better application for it. And so we're trying with many other people in, many other cement companies in the U.S. is trying to open more doors to consume these non-hazardous wastes. The challenge is it's all of the pre-processing. There's a lot, think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to replace fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, pet coke. Well, they don't throw chunks of pet rock into the kiln. They pulverize that to a very small, dusty kind of consistency. So when that gets blown into the kiln, it immediately ignites. Now think about somebody that's got a non-hazardous waste, chunks of this, chunks of that. You've got to grind it down and make it comparable, and that adds a lot of cost.
When we come back from break, by the way, I'm with Ted Reese. He's the president and CEO of Cadence Environmental. Ted, when we come back from break, I want to hear about the transition that put you as the president and CEO, taking over for your father. That's a common topic on this show that many people seem to enjoy, succession planning. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston, sitting across from Ted Reese. Ted's the president and CEO of Cadence Environmental. Ted and I have been having a wonderful conversation. Ted's dropping some golden nuggets of content here. And Ted, I want to get into the business component of it. Let me say that differently. Your leadership component of it. You took over for your father about 5, 6, 7 years ago to take over the president CEO role. One of the more common or more popular topics on this show is succession planning. How do I prepare my successor? How do I prepare to lead? And I'm not going to guide you too much. I want to hear what was it like? Your father started the company. He was an icon in the industry, and then you took it over. What was your focus? So,
that's a conversation you could go very deep into, right? Family succession planning, quote, turning over the keys to a second generation or beyond. And that we definitely struggled with that initially, but I think we found the results made us both more comfortable because we were seeing results with the change, meaning my predecessor, my father, while he felt like he was running the business day to day, I think the reality is once I was in that role of president and CEO, I could act very quickly because I was given authority to do so. I, with our management team, could respond so much faster. And as a result, making, I think, good, smart decisions, I don't feel like I brought in some new textbook from the left or right that changed everything. I think just having an immediate presence, making quick decisions, trusting in our people, and I want to go into delegation a little bit.
Yeah.
But the results of having that immediate presence, we immediately drove I mean, it's crazy. Our profits at this point, we're a 43, 44-year company.
I want to get into that in a moment, but I want to ask you a question first. So you worked underneath your father for how many years prior to taking over that role?
So I've been with the company 23 years. So let's say 15 years in assorted sales manager. Only the last 7 to 8 years did I start taking on an executive role where most of the company reported to me. And then I became president and CEO, I believe, in 2018.
Had you been inventorying for 15 years changes that you would make?
So it's funny, really not. When I think back, I was, first of all, very happy when I joined the company because my wife and I had started a business in retail separately. And while that was a lot of fun for 4 to 5 years, we learned a lot of hard lessons. And one of the things I learned when I joined Cadence is how much I appreciated a paycheck every 2 weeks and that I could rely on it.
Right.
So there was a lot of, and also I appreciate you mentioning, our friendship goes back to our days in New Orleans at Tulane. At the time, I struggled to get through the chemical engineering program. I routinely tell people when they talk about people that came out of the program as great successes, I usually am not in that conversation. I'm usually the guy that, oh yeah, he was a chemical engineer. He made it.
Right.
And so I probably overplay that too much because when I do look back on it, I actually did pretty decent.
Yeah.
And now I'm really proud of that degree. And so much so after we've been out 30 plus years, don't want to age us, but But I went ahead, I think a year ago, and finally bought myself a Tulane ring. And the first thing I put on the ring was BSE, Bachelor of Science in Engineering.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of it. And, but yeah, I mean, I guess it really the last 5 years being president and CEO, I look back on the first 15 years. And the first 15 years, really, I was very fortunate because the company was strong, because we had strong personnel. Dad and I also, I think, jointly agreed. I don't know how much we discussed it, but I've learned through other things in my life, and you've probably learned this with your kids, you're best not to train and educate them. You can be their parent, but if they need to learn how to hit a baseball, probably not best coming from you, because there's just that family dynamic. So we recognized that early, and I trained under other people in various roles. I trained under experienced salespeople for a number of years. And then we were very fortunate to have a COO come to us with, 30 years industry experience. And he was only with us for a few years, but he was definitely the closest I would say I ever had to having a mentor.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really, I guess I always hoped I'd kind of get to the top and get to run the company.
Right.
But I wasn't necessarily angling for it.
Yeah.
Now, flash forward 15 plus years in, then I was ready. And then it was on. And that's probably where there was some heated internal family dynamics, which is been here 15 years. I'm ready. Let's go. And fortunately, we were able to work that out, and I was able to get my opportunity.
So one of the things that you said a moment ago before I interrupted you was one of the quick changes that the company saw was your immediate presence and your ability to respond and desire to respond very quickly to anything the sales team may have needed. And that you were starting to share percentages. Things began to change at that point. Tell me more.
So the first thing was, with my new management team, guys I'd been working with for, 15 years. Now I was the leader, the boss. And so I had a very strong team to work with. And what I really instilled was I was trying to break out of, instead of us being a company where the information funnels up to the top and the top guy absorbs it, makes a decision, tells people what to do, I really wanted to be a company of delegation. We have, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but we've got roughly 42 employees with an average tenure of 18 years. And that's something we're very proud of. I think that comes from a lot of different things, culture. But when you have that, you should use it. And I think one of the ways you use it is by delegating and empowering people to make decisions. And especially because we're a sales marketing organization, our sales customer service teams, the people on the front line who are having the engagement with the customer, like if what I saw is they bring the information back, everybody's excited about a new potential waste stream or new customer. And then once they have to funnel it up to management to then bring management up to speed, understand the profile, the details involved, it's kind of like letting the air out of the balloon. If I was that salesperson, it's like, wah, wah, wah. I mean, I did all this hard work and now I got to wait for you a couple weeks to figure out how you want to price it. So what we did is we changed the process such that we knew kind of our various price points. We knew the different types of customers. And so we put something in place that the sales and customer service teams could use. So when they got that new opportunity, they could act and make decisions very quickly. And only if they had something that fell outside of our box did they need to come to management for approval. So what happened was, I think probably 80-90% of our new business, and a company that's almost 50 years old, we average something like 10 to 15% of our total volume at the end of the year is usually new business. You always lose some business, you always gain some business. But of that new business that was coming in every year, I bet only 5 or 10% of it are ones I was ever contacted to have some input on. I got to sit back and just see the final result, which is, hey, new shipment came in. Hey, here's the new customer. And I think all the way through the process, it really, really motivated people to, by having more ownership and seeing the new opportunity all the way through, they got a lot of enjoyment out of it.
I think it's a great insight that you allowed them, and the profitability came up, didn't it?
It really did. It was something we're very proud of, and that kept me in my role.
Someone is out there scratching their chin going, I want to know more about them. How can they find you?
Well, they can look up cadenceenvironmental.com. We've got a website with a lot of the history. And then if you ever want to reach out to me, feel free on LinkedIn, Theodore T. Reese, Ted T. Reese, President and CEO at Cadence Environmental Energy.
Ted Reese, President and CEO of Cadence Environmental Energy. And we'll have the links to all that in the podcast notes. Thank you, Ted.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back after this break with segment 5.
I'm Joey Mason. For 4 years, my goal has been to produce the best farm-to-table products I'd ever eaten. I've done just that at our on-site USDA facility in Grand Bay, Alabama, allowing us to ship directly to your door. This is true farm-to-table. Visit us at masonhillsfarm.com to see all that we have to offer.
We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Folks, if that show piqued your interest like it did mine, I think perhaps you could hear my curiosity in Ted and the things that they do. You can find that show as a podcast at whatsworkingcam.com. Again, whatsworkingcam.com. My hope is that the time you hear this, we have updated that webpage so that you can enter your email address and you will get a free chapter of my book, What Works. What Works is when we crossed the 200 episode threshold, we took the 10 best ideas that we had heard in those 200 episodes and compiled them into a book. So, and the question that I often get, it's not the 10 best episodes, it's the 10 best ideas. And it's not uncommon for multiple guests to share an idea. They're unwittingly sharing it, but it's a consistent idea that comes up over and over again. Anyway, we catalog those in this book called What Works, the 10 best ideas of the first 200 episodes. If you sign up on that webpage that I gave you called whatsworkingcam.com, you'll get a free chapter, or you can simply go to Amazon and get a copy of that book. I hope you will. It was a fun write, and it's a very easy read. Anyway, what we heard in that content there is some remarkable technology. And we didn't get into the weeds on the technology. Ted told me later that Cadence, the company he works for, Cadence Environmental Energy, has 30 plus patents, he says. They've patented so many different things in this process that they do. They now have 30 plus of them, and there's just a group of smart people who, my impression is, they are doing the work that they're doing for the right reasons. Of course, there's a profit motive. There has to be a profit motive, but they're doing it because they're taking this hazardous waste and disposing of it in a responsible way. And I think it's somewhat refreshing to know that fence post that I may be putting in Clark County, Alabama this weekend as I go up there to do some work with my father on the hunting land, that fence post concrete may have some of this environmental waste in it that's been absolutely rendered null and void. And my impression from Ted and the way he talks about his company and the animation that I was able to see across from me as he and I were talking about it is that they are really proud of the work that they do in taking this waste and disposing of it. Lots of smart people, like I said, 30 plus patents doing this work for the benefit of, frankly, you and me. There's those of us that live here in Southwest Alabama are aware of the coal ash retention pond not far from here. It's a very controversial topic, a very controversial subject, and it seems to me that this technology that Ted and his team spearhead could potentially be used to get rid of that coal ash. Now, I am a liberal arts major. Exactly how that would work, I don't know. Is that stuff flammable? Is there any more carbon left in it? I don't know, but it sure would be nice to see that retention pond and the hazards the threats it is, gone. Anyway, that's it for the show today. I encourage you to find the show again at whatsworkingcam.com. You can find me on the internet. Go to cammarston.com on your Facebook page. I hope you'll follow, click, like, ping, whatever it may be. Find me on Twitter and most active, I would say, on LinkedIn. That's where we tend to throw the ideas out and keep people updated on the show. I appreciate you listening, folks. We absolutely love what we're doing, being able to meet these people talking about this stuff. Absolutely love it. That will wrap us up. Have a good week, everybody. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes, they're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen into this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.